Welcome back to Nick Lenz's novel review. This is episode number 48. This one I'm reviewing a Star Trek book. Like I said last episode, it's a book from Star Trek Enterprise. And it's Star Trek Enterprise, Rise of the Federation, Patterns of Interference, written by Christopher L. Bennett. No, I don't think this guy is related to the Mount Vernon kid. I highly doubt that. This is the fifth book of the series, and this takes place from December. I know it's in 2365. It starts from December 9th, 2165. That's where it starts. It ends with let me see if I can get the right date here. It ends with March 18th, 2166. So roughly this book takes place in a period of 4 months. So yeah, basically it's dealing with the aftershocks of the previous book of this particular series, which dealt with the machines known as the Wear. Those of you unfamiliar with the Wear, they appeared for one episode of the series. They appeared in the episode Dead Stop. They were the machines that basically repaired the Enterprise after it had been heavily damaged via a Romulan war mine. Yeah. Basically, in the show, they never did follow up on exactly what this thing was or where this AI came from. The novels actually bothered to explain it. The previous book actually bothered to explain the origin story of these machines, the fact that they were actually seen during the Romulan War several times, and the fact that the Wear they're all pretty much gone. Yeah. So, like with the previous book, this one ties up another loose end from the series. That one ties up a storyline with the Wear, which is the machine stuff. This one ties up a loose end with Section 31 from the show, because this came out just after the Star Trek Deep Space Nine novel, Section 1 Control. Really awesome. I have reviewed it already. It's on my channel. It's a few episodes back. This one is basically like, I think it's 220 years exactly before the events of this. This one takes place from 2020 for that novel. And Sex 31 in the 22nd century is led by a man named Harris. Though the inner workings of Sex 31 is much more fully in detail in that 31 novel. This basically, this is just the early years of Sex 31. Basically, Reed and Trip basically sort of account for apparently according to this novel, the Sex 31 that appeared in Enterprise started back in 2150. Yeah, that's the first time it showed up, and apparently at this point it had been around for by the time it was sort of shut down, but it basically remained dormant for a couple hundred years. It had been around for basically 16 years. Doing a lot of illegal stuff. Though in the show they are featured frequently. Mainly in the final season of the show. They popped up in roughly a couple story arcs in season 4. They popped up in the two-parter of the which was a follow-up to the Augment, which is follow-up to the Brent Spiner trilogy. On the show, basically, on the Star Trek book, they refer to it as the Augment trilogy because it features the Augments. I refer to it as the Brent Spiner trilogy because it's the 3 episodes that start Brent Spiner. Basically, the one that featured the Klingons, that was a quick little two-parter to follow up on that particular one, and that was the first thing they showed up. They disappeared. They weren't seeing the show again until the 2 episodes that actually ended the series. And no, the actual series finale does not count because both the novels, the fans, and pretty much anybody associated with the show has pretty much ignored the final actual episode of the series. These are the Voyages. And here's the reason why. The episode is utter garbage. Yeah, it's by far the worst episode of the entire series. It's hated a lot more than an episode is actually referenced in this very book. You know what episode actually is referenced in this book? A Night in Sickbay. One of the worst episodes of the series, and pretty much the episode that pretty much killed the series. Though the series managed to last for another 2.5 seasons before it actually ended. But yeah, it pretty much killed the ratings for season 2. Though the ratings did, from what I've heard, the ratings did come back slowly for season 5. Apparently, they come back enough for Paramount to keep the show on the air. But yeah, and of course, not only deal with the artifacts in this book, not only the artifact to Wear, but also something that the Federation was indirectly involved with. leading to rise of a dictator on the planet. Basically, Chip goes to, of course, this Federation strike team, sent as advisors. Basically, a lot of the stuff in here with the whole advisor stuff, trying to overthrow people, it kind of sounds something the United States would do. Yeah, that's what kind of sounds like. Though, according to the writer, basically, he says he got the whole idea of one of the things they would do, like blow up a factory, which is something that would do. That's something like World War II type of stuff. He got that from actually to an actual factory in Boning. It's a factory around D.C. He got tour because he's basically a cousin's. Somebody basically runs the place, so yeah, he got tour of it. And of course, this book also, when Rob Knight's sickbay, basically, there's a good reason why they brought that up. Because apparently, in this novel, it's revealed that Porthos is dying. Yeah. Archer's pet beagle, who has basically been part of the Enterprise, well, mainly part of the Enterprise lore since the start of it, is dying. And it's implied that basically Archer goes watching that at the end. Shrana pops up a few times in the book. There was something that they did start in the previous book, basically sort of the non-intervention policy, which kind of basically is put on hold because of the whole thing with Porthos, which Shrana has no problem putting it off, because basically it's somebody, because Porthos is basically when Archer's close, because he knows Archer really cares about this dog, so, and he really wants him to spend last days with his closest friend, so you gotta praise him for that. Also, Reed is basically relieved as the captain of the Pioneer, and made Archer's assistant chief of staff. Basically, he's named assistant chief of staff for Starfleet, who is his replacement. A woman actually introduced in this very novel. Her name is Caroline Paris, the ancestor of Thomas Paris from Star Trek Voyager. Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. Also, they do have one other famous Star Trek character's ancestor in this book. Captain Kirk's ancestor, Sam Kirk. As far as now, his father in both in the original series and of course in the J.J. Abrams, so his family's name is also Sam as well. So, excuse me, my guess is he probably has a different middle name than the man who actually is his father. And of course, he's of a relationship with a woman who now Kirk in this particular timeline, he's basically a historian, and his girlfriend is a daughter of a Starfleet captain, who at first thinks he's not worthy of being with his daughter. Now the captain's name is Marcus Williams, and his daughter's name is Valerie Williams. I don't know if that's relation to another character from Star Trek. I don't know. I haven't looked much into it, but it's revealed that Marcus Williams, basically, he does play a good part in this novel. He pops up a few times in here, first to play chess with Kirk, then later on he basically confesses to Archer that he has had dealings with Harris, a guy who Chip is trying to take down because he turned against Section 71. Yeah, Chip is basically a spy, and also they also bring up, if you ever watched this particular episode of Enterprise, it's a standalone episode from Season 4, which features these 4 Organian slave girls who pretty much have the crew basically going to a frenzy. And here's the thing. Trip is immune to the pheromones because of his bond with T'Pol. I'm like, seriously, wow, that is something. They actually bring it up in here, and the fact that there's also a previous... Now, they also have a couple other characters pop up in here as well. One who was involved with a book, a story that basically came out 2 books back, deal with the Rigelians, trying to sabotage their efforts to join the Federation. And another one basically is a slave girl, basically, who is a mistress, who basically is a slave to an Orion woman. And there's an implied lesbian sex scene in here. I personally don't have a problem with it. It's fine. It's the first time I've actually seen it in a mainstream Star Trek book where it's not an alternate universe, it's regular mainstream Star Trek that has a lesbian sex scene. It's implied, not fully stated. Yeah, an implied lesbian sex scene. I gotta hand it to you, Christopher Bennett. Crystal E. Bennett, basically. Crystal E. Bennett. Good job. Takes some real balls to put an actual lesbian sex scene in a Star Trek novel. That's not Mirror Universe. Because I have read this also in a Mirror Universe book where this also happened, but in the case of an actual... Now, they did kind of have implied lesbian stuff on the show, with Deep Space Nine, with the episode Rejoined, where there was an actual lesbian kiss. Yeah, Deep Space Nine has happened twice, with Rejoined, and with the Rejoined, I think was in season 3, I think it was. In season 7, there was another lesbian kiss between the Mirror Universe versions of Ezri Dax, so Tiger basically, because she wasn't joined yet, though later on she did become joined, and the alternate version of Kira Nerys, who was the intent. They had lesbian kiss there. And there was implied lesbian, how should we say, touching in Enterprise, but no actual sex scene. Yeah, that's one thing Star Trek has never actually had. An actual gay or lesbian sex scene. They've had confirmed gay characters, like the character of Hawkins from Star Trek First Contact. He was later confirmed to be gay, which makes him the first on-screen gay character ever in the history of Star Trek, that I can think of anyways. Though they have it in the Star Trek Beyond, where Sulu apparently is gay in the reboot films. Okay. But, yeah, and there's also, at one point, there is a particular scene in here where Trip and another guy he's working with, who's trying to sort of help take down this guy and sort of expose Sex-31, and of course, the Orions indicate with this dictator. Apparently they're betrayed, and then they're basically sort of tortured. Well, first they're stripped down butt naked, and then they're also hanging upside down. Yeah, this kind of reminds me of something from Deep Space Nine, with Miles and with O'Brien and Bashir, though they weren't butt naked, but they were hanging upside down. The whole thing of torture and stripped butt naked. Yeah, this actually reminds me of the two-parter Chain of Command from Star Trek Next Generation, which this actually did happen on screen, where Captain Picard was actually stripped butt naked, but he was the suit basically was stripped off, and his suit was basically dropped to his ankles. So yeah, looking up the rating did not go full detail on this because it'd be quite dumb. Now, Enterprise basically was never known for stuff like this at all. Even some of the episodes, even from the first 2 seasons, which people don't really like very much, even people who actually have watched the show admits, yeah, there's stuff, if you read this novel, there's stuff basically that they would never do in the show, much less an actual implied torture. Yeah, but that's something else altogether. Some of you are probably curious about this really good looking cover. Yeah, obviously that's Trip on the cover. Basically, he's holding a different weapon that he's normally holding in the show. Now, in the novels, he worked for Section 31. He's not in Starfleet anymore. Enterprise is here in the book. Excuse me. Now, one thing I do praise Brian Federation for doing, that the writer does, he always likes to have at least one scene in each of his novels, at least for a few pages, or maybe a whole chapter, where it's set on the actual Enterprise itself, because the series is called Star Trek Enterprise, and you got to feature ships somehow. But okay, but you can't feature that much because the ship was decommissioned in the second book of the Romulan War doxology. So, okay, it's a museum ship. You can have the characters visit it once every novel. Good job. Yeah, every single novel, the characters do visit the ship. Now, the one character in this book one character from Enterprise who's not featured very much in this novel is Phlox. Yeah, actually, there's one character who's not making a physical appearance in this novel. Travis Mayweather. He gets referenced a couple times, but surprisingly, he does not make a physical appearance, which makes him the first Enterprise character to skip a novel. I think he's mentioned a couple times, but he's never actually seen. Now, Caroline, basically, she was first introduced in here. She was the first officer of the Vista. And then she got promoted to captain, and she got command of the Essex. But apparently the ship didn't work too well. And then apparently for some reason, I don't really know what happened. She gave up that command for the Pioneer because the ship actually does work. So, and Malcolm basically said that the reason why he couldn't give Travis a motion to captain because he's not ready yet. Because one thing interesting though about Travis, out of the original Enterprise crew, I'm gonna talk about the original series. Talk about this Enterprise crew. Travis and Hoshi were actually the younger members of the crew. Hoshi, basically, with this novel, she's actually engaged to the former armory officer of the ship T'Pol commands, and T'Pol does appear a good chunk in this book. Aside from Archer and Trip, the only other characters who have good good presence in this novel, aside from these two, because these two are two prime focus characters, Hoshi, T'Pol gets a good amount of time too, and Reed. Yeah, surprisingly, Reed gets a lot of character development here, which is something. In the previous books, he didn't get that much development. The biggest development he got was basically two things. One, when he was named Captain of the Pioneer, and two, when he was revealed because of malfunction with a transporter, he can't have kids. Yeah, he can't have kids. Same thing with Archer. Basically, he suffered that as well. Trip, it's never revealed exactly if he has genetic damage or not. Yeah, that's one thing they've never actually done with him. They've never actually diagnosed him with that particular defect. Now, those of you who watched the original series, the transporter works perfectly fine. But in here, it's revealed in the first novel of the series that apparently there's a malfunction with the transporter that's causing people to have genetic defects, basically preventing them to have kids. So all transporter use is suspended, and for basically for actual humans or basically any biological stuff. Now cargo stuff they can still use transporters to transport non-organic stuff like boxes full of supplies, parts for ship. They can use a transporter for that, but they can't use it for actual people because it causes genetic damage. Though apparently, here's something interesting though. There are 3 people in this particular time period who's used a transporter a lot. And these 3 people are Archer, Reed, and Trip. These 3 use it a lot. Which kind of does make sense because these 3 are frequently shown. Even on the show, they use the transporter. These 3 always use the transporter a lot on the show. So it kind of does make sense. They do make one reference to another Enterprise episode. The episode, the Zindi, which they mentioned about the whole thing of Trip's sister who was killed during the Zindi attack on Earth when that beam cut through Florida all the way down to Cuba. Yeah, it cut through Florida. Well, I'm curious though, does my hometown basically exist in Star Trek? I've never actually looked it up, but yeah. This novel is great. And I highly recommend people who are fans of Star Trek. Now, if you didn't like Enterprise that much, I should point out though, season 3 is in season 2. Now, when it comes to the first couple seasons, there are some episodes I do like. I do like the pilot episode. I like the episode that came right after. I like the episode Cold. Let's see, the 2-parter Shockwave. And there's some episodes I like in season 2. 3 is basically when the show starts getting really good. And 4 is basically, for a lot of people, the best season of the series. It's too bad they never made any follow-up stuff. Basically, the novels actually do something that apparently the show wasn't allowed to do. Actual tie up other loose ends, which, I mean, when you finish watching the show, the only loose end that's tied up is a Temper Cold War. That is it. Yeah. This novel is great. I give this book a 9 out of 10. It's really good. I highly recommend it if you're a Star Trek fan or a fan of that show. Okay, so that's it for this episode. Stay tuned. I'm gonna have 3 episodes of the Comic Corner coming up. Now, my next episode I'm gonna do for novel reviews is gonna be on the Star Wars novel, and you'll find out what it is when I get a chance to read a novel and put it up, review. Okay. I'm gonna see you on my next video. Bye.